How do I say hello? What do I say? No, like, what do I say to you? Hello. Hello. What about yo? Hello, everyone. Welcome to season 2 of Art Brunch Archives. Art Brunch Archives is a supercut of all the art centered conversation from the previous week's show. Each week on Twitch, we bring in a new contemporary artist to talk about their work, drink tasty bevs, and just generally hang out. I'm the host of Art Brunch, Rick Bowling. Season 2 brings with it some exciting changes. Jake Leach joins us as new co host and collaborator. The broadcast has a new, fresh look. And archived uploads will definitely be happening regularly. Every week, we're uploading the previous week's show with some edits. YouTube will hold the art part of the conversation so you can see which slides we're referring to. But if you do want to hear all of the nonsense, the hijinks, and all the weird stuff we get into on the show, check out the podcast. Right now, please just take a moment to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. That kind of stuff really helps us grow right now. And lastly, I have to plug watching the show live with our awesome community on Twitch. It's the way the show's intended to be, and it's like kind of better, but we're happy you're here anyways. All of these links and more are available in the description. Our guest this week is Jack Garland. His bio reads, Jack Garland is an American photographer. He was born in 1993 in Loveland, Colorado. Jack's work has spanned a decade and focuses on color, memory, and melancholic emotions that he first experienced as a child in his small town. Growing up wanting to make movies and being struck by films from an early age, he picked up his first film camera at 16 as a means to practice framing and lighting, and began photographing everything around him. Taking to photography with more ease than film, he stayed in the process, and his body of work has grown ever since. With work ranging from landscape, portraiture, and documentary, Jack has a unique and non-singular eye that allows his look to bleed into many genres of photography. We pick up with the show right as we begin talking about Jack's work. Enjoy the show. We're kind
Yeah.
of entering into the space where you guys are, you know the work, and I've had a brief amount of time with the work, but
Yeah.
it feels as though we're kind of like entering into this discussion of the work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if you're good with it, Jake, I think that we can just move over to viewing the work as we kind of talk about these elements that you're focusing on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and just as a starting off point, and obviously we can go any direction you want, Jack, but like I feel like a lot of your preliminary or, I I don't know what words you use, but it's like there's the suburbs are used a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
in a lot of ways I can't think of something more political than the suburbs.
Sure. Sure.
But
Yeah.
I feel like your commentary on it though, to me, is very broad, and it feels
Yeah.
like it allows for people to get out of it what they want, which is what I think a
Yeah.
lot of amazing artists do. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna
And to
stop there.
piggyback off that, I think like
Yeah.
I kind of made a point early on, kind of maybe out of laziness, to be like it's up for interpretation.
Mm.
Like all of my work is kind of like I think I heard something Gregory Crutzen, who's like a great photographer. He makes a lot of really great kind of ambiguous portraiture and landscape stuff. Um, but he said something about how he just likes making kind of an ambiguous scene and then allowing each viewer to kind of figure out what each person is doing in that scene. And it's ambiguous enough that it's not in your face, right? It's very like subversive in the sense that um, everyone is talking about or like looking at it and contriving their own the narrative out of it, right? And I liked that a lot because I didn't know, I'm like an early 20s kid and photography was cool and interesting, right? But I didn't really have like a message. And hanging out with a lot of other artists in like the music scene and stuff, like messages were kind of important. So that just felt like such a big undertaking to me. So I was like, I'll just start making kind of ambiguous work, and but like knowing full well that like because I'm making it, there's clearly a piece of me and like what I experienced coming through on that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So um yeah, so I think a lot of my work kind of lies in this ambiguity of like each person can kind of take with it take what they want from it. They could see like a really lonely scene, or they could see like a really uh, happy kind of environment or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of that's way more interesting to me than just like putting like the thesis on the wall. You know what I mean? And just being like, this is what it was. This is my intention. I think art is way more interesting when it's up to the person to interpret. Like, what if it was like negative or positive or this or that? You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think a lot of my work, it's also just fun. I think to be subversive and not like my stuff is like super subversive, but I think a lot of it is just ambiguous enough where it's like anyone looking at it can the idea behind it could be anything, you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that's fun to me. That's
Well,
way more fun than just being like, here it is, you know. And that's I like art like that as well, but I don't think I make art like that.
Mm.
I feel like it's remiss to you briefly touched on like the music scene or being in the music world.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like your experience with music at, you know, not to sound like one of those people, but at the
Oh yeah.
intersection of
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
your photography and like how
yeah.
that's influenced it?
Yeah, I mean it was huge. Like I was just, you know, all my friends got guitars and gear and started playing music, and I had just given up playing guitar because it didn't make sense to me. But I had a camera, so I was still friends with all these people. So they would literally just be like, "Oh, you're the guy with the camera. Come over and like take like do photos for us." That was like my first introduction with making making work, right? Like in like a semi-professional kind of context. Like, oh, like my friends want band photos or my friends want an album cover, right? And I'm just the guy that has the camera, and like we're friends, and like, you know, yeah. So making work that way was kind of cool. But
Which
that was like
doesn't
my
work
first intro.
with the idea of like ambiguity, you know. So
No,
like
yeah, absolutely. And
so that work is very like unambiguous work. That work
yeah,
is like documentation work, or
absolutely.
they say like, oh, I want you to make us look brutal, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh, I got you. I know a sewer nearby.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the cool thing was like I think I got in like the right scene where a lot of people um understood me outside of photography.
Hmm.
So they didn't really they trusted me without having like a super nailed down sense of what they wanted.
Yeah.
Especially with like album covers. Like it was kind of just like, dude, like this one photo you posted like in 2012 or something, like it's really cool. Like can we do something kind of like that, but like at the end of the day, like we trust you because we like you as a
Hmm.
person and like we get along. Um
Yeah, I don't mean to
and
interrupt. We have kind of a
yeah.
pertinent message in chat here from the Boogie Nights, whom is a crew member of the travel agency, great
Hell yeah.
supporter, and is kind of interested in the intersection between music and art as well.
Yeah.
Boogie Nights says, please take a moment to look up Gregory Cruden. Um,
Crutzen.
Crudson.
Crutzen
Yeah.
has been a horrible human being. His work, of course,
Oh.
is in photography's canon and discourse, but he has been predatory to women. His latest body of work has also literally wrote he was trying to depict the psychological state of women. He is a very toxic person who has abused his power in the photography community. I also looked up to Crutzen in school for his work and beautiful
Yeah.
sets, but it's important to acknowledge that he's been a negative, predatory person in the photo community. So thanks to Boogie Nights for sharing that. I think it's a really important part of the conversation that I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
the
I had no
situation. I'll
idea.
look into it.
Yeah, I haven't followed his work in years, but I remember at least back in college
Hmm.
liking some of his early work for sure.
Yeah, and I think, for us, like a lot of things that happened back in college, like weren't informed by the perspective that we
Oh,
have
absolutely not.
that
Yeah.
we have now. And Boogie Nights had a great way of kind of sharing that with us as well.
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting.
we can have discourse in regards to this person. I don't have enough knowledge to really speak to the claims except to believe them because I believe women and I believe Boogie Nights. Um,
Totally.
but there's an asterisk there that I think is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, yeah.
Duly noted. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for
Interesting.
sharing that, Boogie.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think with the music and photography aspect of it, it was um there was almost like a great kind of experimentation there with making work. Which, yeah, you get the classic like band photo or whatever, but a lot of times it was like I was so early on in my process of like taking photos that um it was just cool to kind of like be the guy in the room with the camera
Hmm.
and experimenting with photos and stuff
Being
like
that
that.
guy.
Yeah, yeah, like I got to just hang out with people that I was semi comfortable with and experiment with portraiture and documentation. And that was really cool. And then also just like the album cover stuff was like sometimes where I found my next kind of like stepping off point into like a new kind of level of like, oh, like I had to do like a long exposure for like a cover with like a person in it, and that was
Hmm.
like that wouldn't have happened um, if I hadn't have um, worked with this band that like wanted something very not specific, but like pushed me almost to that level.
Yeah.
So
So
um,
I'd like to connect a couple of things that I see here. So
yeah,
the nature of kind of like this ambiguous space in music,
yeah,
often in like lo-fi music or just in any of these spaces, there is a lot of kind of ingrained ambiguity in, especially like instrumentation,
yeah,
just kind of sparse instrumentation type work. And then like looking into the album cover as like a method of like communicating a series of ideas
hmm,
simultaneously or
absolutely,
so then when you're talking about this like perceived ambiguity or kind of this like initial position as like reaching into ambiguous spaces, like they're not flat in their ambiguity. So like they're not like looking at clouds, for instance. Even those aren't flat in their ambiguity.
yeah. There's a lot going on.
So then you start to be able to, and I see with this work, is that like while the narrative is kind of like in a loose structure, like this piece in particular, I think to
Hmm.
me speaks to maybe like four major themes of the human experience. Like
Yeah,
this is like either like love or death or like those are like two that really kind of stand out, and I,
sure.
I don't feel like listing them all, but like it's not about cooking. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think this is about cooking, right? It's not so ambiguous that this could be like a cover to a recipe
Sure.
book, unless it
Yeah.
was, and then that's a recipe book that I'm
Then the
definitely
jokes
buying.
the jokes on you. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I will say, however, when you took this photo, because it's
yeah,
so good, you were cooking, if you know what
Oh.
I mean. Like
Oh.
he was
yeah.
cooking.
I was
Yeah.
cooking
Yeah.
with Gad.
Jack, I
Um.
feel like
Yeah.
if I can just jump in here,
Go
is
ahead.
like
Yeah.
your work, I think is deeply musical. Like I think that like it's funny to me that you wanted to start in film, like as in like films, movies. But like I feel like much of your work is like cinematic, but something I feel like a lot of people don't think about or talk about is that like literally half of a film is the audio.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
Mm.
of what you're perceiving. If it's like maybe, I mean, maybe you could say there's the scent of the theater or something, but
Yeah.
like
Yes.
which is usually gross, but like
That's like
the
a
film itself,
212,
yeah.
if
on
that.
on on the and like you are, I feel like, creating a sort of like again like ambiguous musical space with your photos because it is deeply emotional, and I think that emotion we associate with the sound because the sound of a film creates sort of or emphasizes or maybe like really drives home the emotion of it, and I
Yeah,
feel like
through some sort of kind of instinctual.
right. But
Absolutely.
I think with great, like, because you've limited yourself to just the physical formal medium of photography to some degree, that like you really have to drive home the emotion of it visually. And
Yeah.
like that's why I think where a lot of great art comes from is from limitation. And I feel like because of that, like music to me very clearly has influenced your work in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm usually I don't know who else does this, but I like to walk around a lot at night and kind of just explore. That's where a lot of these scenes come from. There's Jake, and yeah, I'm usually listening to music of some sort, whatever it may be. But I think it really has a good way of kind of being a catalyst for um, kind of going in certain directions or thinking about things cinematically, kind of like you're in a movie in a way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I usually use music kind of as like a stimulant or something, like an
Totally.
enhancer. Um,
So how does that
to
contrast to these photos of inner spaces? Like, if that is your
yeah,
process for
inside.
these outward spaces, I'm also curious about your process for these inner spaces.
Yeah, those are a lot more quiet, I think, which maybe kind of reflects in the photos. But it's usually like I'm alone. I'm usually the person standing in if there's a person in there, or I'm getting someone I'm incredibly close with to be in the photo, and not because they look a certain way or anything like that, but mostly just I'm comfortable with them because I'm naturally like not a very kind of uh, I don't, what's the word? I'm not a very um, I'm not a very like direct person when it comes to like being like do this, do that. Like I very much like leave it up to a collaboration with whoever I'm working with if they're in a photo, and usually they maybe know what I want just from talking with me and just getting to know me or whatever. And it's never like a I don't know. It's never really like a super intimidating process. It's just like it's very casual and quiet and uh, intimate, I guess I'd say. But yeah, it's doing stuff inside. I think is fun in the sense that it's either just me, and I'm like setting a timer on my camera and I'm running to pose the position, or it's I'm working with someone I like incredibly, I'm like incredibly close with, um, which has kind of been hard in Chicago because there's just not a lot of people that I can use for photos if I
Mm.
want to do a photo with someone in it, that I think like, oh man, I got a great idea, and like where would this I just need like the right person to kind of just do their thing, and they don't even have to be like a model or anything. Like this photo right here, my friend Kevin, he's a musician and like a writer, and he's in so many of my photos because we would just he just understood kind of what I was going for, and yeah, and it was just cool to work with people like that, and
Didn't work.
to wish I could zoom in and see his face.
Yeah, it's trying.
Oh, no.
We talked about this, I think like a couple days ago, but just like I don't want to be one of those like, uh, I don't want to sell myself, right? Like I don't want to be like this big deal. I just want to make like cool work and work with cool people, and not even cool work, just interesting work maybe. Not everyone has to like it. That's fine. But
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. I just want to work with cool people, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like this is something we all chatted about
Yeah,
in like our like preliminary hangout for this is like
yeah.
where artists stand like just before their like first big work or like before there's like expectations of an artist. And Rick,
Hmm.
you were talking about that a lot, and I
Yeah.
think that like, but like Jack, you've been in the game a minute. You're not some Fresh Daisy,
Relatively in
which
the
is
game, yeah.
like you have a very, I think, commanding following, and you have I know a Jack Garland shot when I see it,
Sure.
even
Mhm.
if the subject matter is very different from
Yeah.
the past. That like I'm curious where you're feeling at this point in your life, like
Yeah.
expectations on yourself, but also from the public. How do you feel
I
about
mean,
that in
I still feel like no one's watching me, which is a good thing and a bad thing because after this amount of time, you're like, what am I doing wrong? But also, I think it's just like I'm not a super. I don't sell myself in the same way as a lot of artists will, and not to say that that's bad or good, but just to say like I'm not out there like showing like networking.
grinding? Hashtag
Yeah, like
grinding?
I don't know how to do that. I'm
Mm.
so bad at it, right? Like I can barely. I think over quarantine I wrote like 4 or 5 emails to different studios and galleries, being like, "Hi, here's my here's my website. Um, I'm interested if you'd be willing to like let me. I'd love to in the future collaborate at some point. Like it's I don't necessarily stand behind my work in the sense that like I don't want to have to be someone I'm not to like get my work to a higher position. I would love to just be someone sees their work and says, "I'm hyped on this. I'm cool. I'm cool with this." And I still do a ton of work with bands. So um, a lot of my work stems from like album art, which is really fun.
Mhm.
And that's always great because those people are coming to me and just being like, give me a Jack Garland
Yeah.
photo.
Get Jack Garland's a JG special.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is great. And like they're like, we came to you because we like you
Yeah.
and we want to work with you. And that's like so reassuring as opposed to like going to galleries or going to like editors or people in the art space that it's you kind of have to win over through other means than your art
Mm.
necessarily sometimes, and that's like really hard for me to do because I don't necessarily think I could like sit down with someone and be like, here's my 5-year plan,
Yeah.
here's where I want to be.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a question from the chat. We've got Chris
Yeah.
Griffin 522, great friend of the stream. Welcome, Chris. Good to
What's
see
up,
you.
Chris?
Does Jack prefer still life, staged photography, or more random dynamic shots that are unplanned?
Oh, that's a good one. I love it all. I think it's all so cool. um like still life's fun. Still life's
Mm.
really fun to mess around with. Like that Kevin shot,
Mm-hmm.
the one with like the all the pinks and the blues. That was literally, yeah, that one. That was all choreographed, staged. Like that was our living room. We moved all the couches are behind me in this shot.
Mm.
I placed the rug there. I put the table. I bought those flowers at like a Savers.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, and then we hung up this mirror here. And that was in Kevin's bedroom. That was just something he had in the house, and we were roommates at the time. So, and just like, and then it was just kind of like a matter of like taking the shot, looking at it. There was a ton of stuff on the deck too outside, and we got rid of all
Yeah.
that. And we
But
just
didn't
placed everything.
disturb the banister of freshly snowed snow.
Exactly. That was
Yes, that was hard.
very important to me. But that's just stuff you get used to after a while. It's like being like, that's important. Don't touch that.
Yeah.
Um, and like we just turned the TV on, and I think I just put the color blue or like pink on the TV.
Oh.
Like just screen shared it from my laptop with like
Oh,
an
okay.
HDMI onto the TV, and then turned off all the lights, and that was our light source,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So you just do like a 3 or 4 second exposure. That's why Kevin also isn't extremely sharp
Uh-huh.
because he's moving slightly. But
So to answer Chris's question, it's
I love it
like
all.
I mean it's like all of that at once, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there are these staged elements as well as like these, random, you can't control where the snow is on
yeah,
the opposite roof.
yeah,
There's these random elements that are existing,
yeah,
as well as like this dynamicism of like, getting, you've said his name multiple times, but getting your friend in the right part of the frame, it's like, for me, if I was just to make a broad generalized statement about photography, is that a lot of good photography kind of interacts in all of those spaces
yeah,
simultaneously.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and to like piggyback off that, like the other shot you had on before that, the car scene, that was literally like my first day in St. Louis, and people were lighting fireworks off in the street, and I just happened to have a car roll by, and that was just a shot I had taken with a car accidentally driving through the shot. So
Yeah.
like, shows you what I know. Like, it's just sometimes stuff just really cool stuff from the natural world like happens, and
There is an
that's the
essence.
best.
There's an essence there, and I come into contact with that in, my iPhone photography,
Yeah.
where, snapshots aren't just snapshots for me anymore with my
Yeah.
art background. Sometimes I get really complimented by Tiffany, for instance, where we'll both see the same thing and we'll both pull out our phones to like capture the image because we have like a similar eye for event now.
Yeah.
And like, the way that each person just sees it in that quick moment, I think we can really kind of dictate a lot of interesting things about the individual. And sometimes she
Yeah.
compliments me as like, "Oh, how'd you do that so quickly?" And it's like,
Mhm.
well, like, is it quickly, or have I been taking photos for like a cumulative amount
Yeah.
of 100 or 1,000 hours just
Yeah.
in like little snapshots? So being able to like have the control that I see in your work to now, I mean, it doesn't even look staged, right? This doesn't look staged. Like
Doesn't?
Yeah, not at all.
no, there's like a
Whatsoever.
nature to this for
Oh, there's
sure.
that was 100% like we moved so much shit for that.
I mean, functionally, there has to be some kind of like portraiture staged element of
Yeah.
it, but it also kind of feels like, oh, you left the TV on all night, and this is
Yeah.
like where
Yeah.
it ended up, and
Yeah.
this is like the next morning. This is snow day vibes,
Yeah.
Oh my
and you
God.
saw the
Yeah.
photo and you were like, okay, like I need this, but like let's work for it. It
Yeah.
can feel
Totally.
even that natural. But whereas this one like does clearly feel kind of more
Kind of like a
snappy.
like a documentarian, like kind of just I was there when this thing happened.
Hmm.
Like
Um,
miracle moment for sure.
well, yeah, and
100%.
I
But you
think
were
a lot
ready.
of yeah,
Yeah.
and I think I think if I'm not good at, I've got a lot of photos, right? Like I've got like a lot of photos
Mm.
in like Lightroom, and I think if anything, I'm good at kind of like finding like because I go out every once in a while and I'll just take stuff with no kind
Wait,
of
I just realized Lightroom is a play on Darkroom.
yeah
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's a good name.
LOL.
That's a
Did
good
not
name
know
for a
yeah.
that.
program.
Adobe killed it with that one.
They
Yeah,
they knocked
Dude.
that one out of the park, boy.
oh yeah,
Wow.
All right,
insane.
great.
Yeah, but I don't think I'm necessarily like this insane. Sometimes I have these moments where I've got like an idea, right? But a lot of times it's just like let's go out and like go to the woods. Let's go find some trees.
Yeah.
Let's go and then none of it looks good on the camera. None of
Mm.
it gets me excited, but I take it back and I just upload it and like a couple weeks later I just start experimenting with it, and I think that just comes from like my non-formal background. Like I didn't go to school for this. I went to school for digital media. I got like an associate's, so I learned how to like you know uh like do some graphic design stuff and
Hmm.
maybe do some like I learned all like the Adobe programs, but that's it. um but I think I always loved kind of manipulating photos to an extent, and I think I'm really good at seeing when there's an opportunity to do that in a photo that just happens to be like kind of nice. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like this original photo I think is really big, but I
Mhm.
knew like the cropping and everything, the framing was like important, and I think yeah, it's I think there's something to be said about like not just being like a good photographer, but like a good editor,
Mm.
a good
Yeah.
like of a vibe checker. You know, if you look at a photo and you're like, this has something, there's something about this, or like there's a certain amount of like
I was gonna say director, but yeah, vibe
yeah,
checker works too.
maybe
Yeah.
yeah, and there's a certain amount of potential in an image, I guess, and so like even now, like I think last week I went through and found some stuff from like 2014 that I really liked
Hmm.
and that I hadn't touched, never edited, but it's like the stuff like the kind of techniques I was using right now, which is like, blow the shadows out, crush the blacks, do all this stuff, play with like the temperature. Um, that applied now to those photos, and those were like actually kind of interesting photos again. Um, so I think it's important to kind of also state like, man, like you don't have to take like technically good photos. You can make them interesting in post a lot of times. I think there's like such a Puritan aspect to like photography sometimes where it's like, man, I only shoot film and I never edit, and I just what you get is what you get. And yeah.
That's me, like a loser.
Well, and that's fine if you want to hold yourself to those disciplines. But like for
That's
me,
what I
it's
do.
always been like, dude, I just do whatever I want, and then like later on, like when people ask me like, what did you take that on? I'll be like, it was my iPhone, and it's super cropped, and it was from 6 years ago or something, and that's like that's cool. Like, and it's like there's no rules. Like I don't have an individual camera I shoot on with.
Yeah.
I don't. I've got everyone. There's a lot of gear people out there and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You guys were
Have
talking
these-
about having some gear boy
some
talk.
gear talk. Yeah.
And only in the I feel like attempt to just be like, I think gear talk can be cool. Gear
It's
talk,
fun
if
if you
done
want to
right.
nerd out. Like, yeah, if you want to be like the guy that like stands next to another dude's car and ask him about, like, just to kind of form a relationship, right? But it's not the end
Right.
of it all.
But also, I think like it's not to like divulge the secrets, but it's more of like you don't like.
No
I
camera
think
has secrets. No camera.
right, to level the playing field. Like like if anyone comes up to me like when I was playing music more, like they'd be like, "What's your pedal board, bro?" I'm like, literally anything you could get at Guitar Center, excuse me.
Yeah.
That like that like to chat gear is to give the secrets sort of, but enough to be like, I mean, you can't do what I do because I
Yeah.
do me. No one can
Yeah,
ever.
absolutely.
As a tool, as a instrument, all of us are unique. Our meat computer of our brain cannot be bought at Guitar Center or at
Yeah.
B&H. Like you put the same camera in front of everyone. However, I also think I'm of the thought process of like, if Jimi Hendrix is playing a Squier guitar, he can still rip on it, but
Yeah.
like it's gonna sound like shit a little bit because it's a Squier.
Sure,
But if
yeah,
you
like
put
there are physical limitations to like anything. Like I take an
Right.
iPhone photo and like there's going to be noise in certain areas.
So we're gonna transition back into this show where we were before the break, as we were talking about permanence and happenstance inside of photography. On the break, Jake mentioned that this was a good photo to speak about that conflict, but also that synergy of ideas.
I was with Jack in LaBaugh Woods in Chicago, and it's like a very unique space of like dense woods in the middle of like urban space, but also kind of next to this like very suburban area in Skokie, Illinois. Anyway, long story short, what I felt like this moment spoke to, I think in Jack's work is more like that middle ground space of, yes, a planned moment is something that like, oh, I have an idea, but it also being as a spur of the moment. Like to me, very like as a musician and photographer now coming from that space of like, I have this thing that I heard in the jam, if you will, like
Yeah.
this thing that that's just like that space is great. Let's figure that out. Jake, go stand in it. So that's what I know of that experience. I want to know what Jack's thought of that space was.
Yeah, that whole thing conspired was that this shot, this little opening kind of meadow area, it was like right off the side of a sidewalk on the way to the woods. And I remember we were walking there, it was a little brighter. It was a little earlier in the day. And I said to Jake, "Oh, I would like to get a shot there at some point." I just saw it. I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of nice." And on our way back after like we had taken some photos in the woods, and Jake had we had both kind of messed around. I was like, "Actually, would you just mind going in there? I know you didn't really like plan to be a model, but
Anytime, baby.
just stand in there and just this it's still to me sort of a conceptual photo in the sense that like I could go back there and do that exact same thing next year, with someone with a different outfit or something. But it was almost kind of like a test shot. But I ended up liking it so much that I just kept it. But yeah, it was just one of those moments where like the two, like spontaneity and planning, kind of came together in a way that was just kind of like what I love about photography. Whereas like you just get to a place and you're like, you see the possibilities, and then you just try to make something happen. Like I don't shoot down things or ideas because like I don't have a model, or I don't have, like, if Jake wasn't there, I would just set up the tripod and go do that myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would set my light on the tripod,
Mm-hmm.
position it in a way where I could get that great light, and I'd go do that myself, and I'd try to position myself in a way that I was ambiguous enough to be like, that's not Jack. That's maybe not Jack. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so you had
yeah.
that, you have the tools on either side of that conundrum. But I mean,
Yeah.
I think also like a thing that we've been kind of dancing around inside of this whole conversation is like the methods of like building moments or building communities with one another. And this is something
Yeah.
that's like memorable to Jake, and you're like, well, I could have just
Absolutely.
done it myself, but like it's
Yeah.
better that you didn't.
No,
It,
totally. Like that photo is literally like like in my mind, it's like a reflection of my love for Jake.
mm,
You know what I mean?
here it
Yeah.
is.
I'm serious though. Like all
You
like
can't tell
the
from the
photos.
angle, but he's down on one knee.
Yeah, he's. I'm proposing.
I
Maybe
do.
Jake
I
is.
do. Yes, a million times yes.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. Like I look at like all the photos I have of like Kevin, that one guy in that photo. Got hundreds of like interesting, cool photos, and it just it serves in my mind as like a reminder of like the community and like the friendships I've had in the photography world, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes to me it's like, why work with a model when you can like work with someone that like you want to have like a good relationship with. Yeah.
Well, real quick, and I want to say this, and just to like kind of touch the gear talk, and we can move on from that if you want. But like, Jack, I feel like you have like an arsenal of tools, to say that like if we're gonna use gear, like tools
Yeah.
gives an element of like functional pertinence. You know what I mean? It's not just like, oh, here's this thing I have. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like the tools that you use, like particularly with this photo, when I was part of it and you took it, that like, you have this like light wand, like you experiment with like physical objects, that it's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
like you threw that up in Photoshop later and like, viscoed it to shit or something, whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff, like I feel like honestly the vast majority of what you do is seemingly in camera to
In
some
camera.
degree.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important to me in the sense that like maybe there's a part of me that really respects people that can get stuff out of camera like perfectly. Like the only thing you're messing around with is like contrast and exposure. I'm not there yet, and I don't know if I ever want to be, but there are people that shoot stuff and it just looks beautiful right out of camera.
Hmm.
And um, there's a certain kind of like craftsmanship, kind of, we say that kind of loosely now in the 21st century, but like that you just want to be really good at what you fucking do,
Yeah.
and not like kind of fix it so much in Photoshop or whatever.
Hmm.
And so I set sort of parameters for myself in that, like I don't mess around too much with hue sliders. I don't mess around with like a lot of technical stuff to get what I want. I don't like stack images and then like kind of blend stuff. It's all like that's a single image, um,
Yeah.
that I got, and I think that's kind of important for me. Maybe not for like the entire genre and individual's idea of photography, but for me, it's like there's a lot of importance in like shooting something, um, and getting it as close to perfect as you can in camera.
Hmm.
And for the longest time, like like I didn't understand that you could like go out and buy like an LED light wand that could like
Mm.
project colors. So it's like I was bringing like no joke, like different colored like Tupperware
Lids.
like lids
Yeah.
that had different colors, and I was like shining lights through them,
Uh-huh.
and I was just like that. But that was like that worked for me, and that was like comfortable. But like I looked probably insane when I like take photos with people, because I would just be like, hey, let me just get all of like my crap out of my bag, and it was just
Yeah.
like tin foil, uh, like weird gels and things like that, like things that weren't conventional to like.
Or like taillights.
Yeah, like
Of a
literally,
car.
like I would like pull my car around
Oh yeah.
and just like put a brick. I had a brick in my back seat, and I would put a brick on my brake, like on my brakes, and I would like compose the photo around like where the taillights were.
So even,
know?
not to connect disparate elements, make
Yeah.
too far of a bridge, but I think the thing that Jake was mentioning that he liked about this photo was the experience of modeling for you was being kind of in this like happenstance space, like the space where you're working with materials that you have.
Yeah.
And like this photo doesn't happen if you have to call an agency and hire somebody and pick somebody out of a body book
No.
and like pick their
Yeah.
clothes and whatever it is.
Well, and I can't logistically, like that's so overwhelming to me that I will never, like someone else has to deal with that.
You'd
Like I
have
will
to
take a
have
photo, but like I cannot
You
be
gotta
the
get a
decision
producer.
maker in a lot of that.
you'd have to
I
have
like
such good reason. You'd have to have
yeah,
such a backing behind the
so much
philosophy
intention and
of the
like
work, right?
yeah, and like in a very like monetary incentive in a way, like we're doing this because this will make someone money.
And
Yeah.
for the same sense, like you were making it red with the tools that you had to make it red,
Hmm.
be it tail lights or Tupperware container lids,
Yeah,
because that was the outcome that you were looking for, and
yeah,
being able to access that outcome, I think is really fundamental to the emerging artist. And
yeah,
with the work with people who work in painting, I'm a painter, so working in contemporary painting, like everything goes towards hopeful outcomes. Like process-oriented work has like a strong foundation in just like mostly trying to figure out how to get it there. And there's so much work inside of how to get it there, and like maybe there are LED light wands, right? But that wand might not be the same thing as like
exactly.
backing your car up to it.
Yeah,
Like
no, there is literal like scientific stuff that's different.
yeah, and that's not like
And
always what you want, but now you
yeah,
have both.
yeah, which is I'm so thankful for is like I learned on the cheap. I learned literally just by being like what's around me and being
Hmm.
like creative, and then being like, okay, well now I have a little bit of money. Like I know some photographer I love is using this thing called
Something.
a
Yeah.
light wand.
Yeah.
So, oh, it's this much money, okay, and I buy it, and then I start using it, and then it's like but then it also opens me up to just be like, I don't have to back my car up into a forest. I can start making new work, like, and I can start making like really interesting kind of like um it totally opens up a new world, and that's
Yeah.
so exciting when you get to those when you plateau for a while, and then you kind of, if you're persistent, you will find a new whether it's tool or whether it's an idea, you'll find something new to kind of elevate you to that next thing, right?
Yeah, but
So like
it's not
I
only gear that
no,
elevates you to that, right? It's also
it's
and
ideas and
yeah.
kind of just
Influence. Yeah.
understanding and influence, and yeah,
And
like
have
for
you
me it's like,
backed your car up? Like have you backed your car up
oh yeah,
since you bought the light wand?
yeah, absolutely. Because
That's
I need that light. I
that's the
need
art right there.
that.
Yeah.
Like
That's the
like
shit
my
that we're
light
here
wand
for.
is, yeah. Like I don't need, like my light wand isn't strong enough. But
Yeah.
these lights are like fucking huge. So like if I need to get like a huge clearing or like a dirt road in like red light or whatever, I just need to illuminate it. Like thinking about like everything as a tool, right? Like
Yes.
every aspect of, especially with photography, and that's what's so fun is like just changing one element of something or seeing something differently. Like I remember one time I didn't have like I didn't have something to like reflect light on. So
Mhm.
I just went and I bought a mirror at like Michael's or whatever, or like a thrift store. And I just started using this mirror to just like blow huge amounts of light onto to like reflect onto something that I couldn't get light on,
Mhm.
and it totally like changed the game for me in terms of like, oh man, like nothing is sacred in terms of like access for like what I want to take a photo of, because it's all just like how willing are you to like try something else. And like I grew up just never having much, so it was always like this kind of guerrilla style
Mm.
of making thing making photos.
So
Like
yeah.
even like the earliest album art and stuff is just like found shit that like we put together to like create this thing, but like people look at it and they're like, whoa, like was that done in like a studio? And I'm like, no, this was done on like a friend's fireplace with like, like a bunch of like uh different fabrics and stuff, and we put like, yeah, literal uh like Tupperware lids over all the lights, and we just turned them on, and then we just experimented, and like
That's
experimenting is
sick.
huge for figuring out like what works, and like not apologizing for it and not feeling stupid or less than because
Yeah.
you're not able to own the best camera, the best gear, whatever.
And
Like
half the
I
time that's like it's gets in the way more than it does anything.
Yeah.
100%, like it's just more financial burden I have to worry about. Like shit, I just have like more, like I have I have a drawer for
Mhm.
Tupperware lids.
If you get a Tesla from selling photographs, like are you backing the Tesla up into the forest?
Dude, gang.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that'd be fire. That'd be fire.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I, yeah, like I love that kind of mentality of like, man, like do like the things you make with like cheap means prevent you from making things further in those like in the future maybe, or like
and
I don't know,
sometimes
just
they do. Sometimes they do.
yeah, and like sometimes they just become a burden, right? So like I think as a photographer, like practicing like self-awareness
Mhm.
is, I mean, just in any art, right, like is really like evaluating like your process and like
Mhm.
what you like to do and what you're comfortable doing.
And it sounds
Like
so
don't
obvious, but it's like
but
no,
no,
like what
it's
you
really
want to
fucking
do.
Yeah.
it's so fucking
Who
hard.
are
Like
you?
Yeah, bro.
yeah, like and that's the daily struggle. Like I think a lot of people, especially with like the age of social media, like don't display their insecurities about that shit
Mm.
in the same way. Like it's all success and it's all great and it's all good, and like they don't post until something good's happened, right? But like I think there's like an element of like, man, like this just works for me and I'm not
Mhm.
gonna apologize for it. And like even like some of like the, I watch a lot of like, I go on like the YouTube deep holes of like photographers.
Yeah.
Um, none of like the recent ones, but just old dudes and women that take photos, right? And like they're just like still shooting on what works for them, and maybe it's so outdated and like redundant and painfully hard to like operate, and
Mhm.
like it's just confusing, right? But like it is what all it's like the special brew that
Yeah.
works together to like make what they do important and special and them. um and so I'm like, dude, I'm gonna be shooting with just like whatever I like, whatever I have.
Well,
Go ahead, Jake.
yeah, no, and just to finalize gear talk of this statement, whether it be an AOL CD in the mail or Adobe whatever,
Please.
that like the gear chat at some point just becomes like, yeah, do you have a car? Do you have a
Yeah,
friend with a car? Just like back that shit up in the
yeah,
forest and do
Yeah.
that.
yeah,
Do you have
like it like
Tupperware? Like you don't need like an issue number. I mean, if you know the
yeah,
issue number, like if it's on somewhere, Jack, like let us
Oh
know in the
yeah.
chat. You'll know
yeah,
for sure. But like
Type 9 plastic only.
yeah,
exactly. Like, I mean, at some point, like, I can be like, I know exactly what camera you have, but like, yeah, okay, go get a DSLR, whatever. But
Uh-huh.
also, like, if you can get a camera that's the best you can get, you can also do
that's all
anything
that
with it.
matters.